know your name, I swear I do. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sorry, what did you say? And I've known you for how long? Your face is so familiar, but no name comes to mind. Please, can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last?
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I welcome you today. We're going to have a great show talking about the joy in dementia. And I know a lot of people think that that's a tough road to hoe, but I think you're going to find after talking with our guest today that it is possible. I know I've lived it and breathed it on my 30-year journey with my mom, and I fully accept the possibility and the joy that's there. But before I introduce our guest today, I always like to welcome everyone to Alzheimer Speaks Radio because we are always getting new listeners around the world. So bottom line, this show was created, and Alzheimer Speaks as a whole was created because of my journey with my mom. As a family member, I just felt really lost and isolated and felt there had to be more resources out there for all of us. I knew there had to be others like my family. And so Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. And we do that by raising everyone's voice. So all of you are welcome to join in. You can always call in to our guest line at 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. And if you have a comment or if you just want to ask a question, we would love to hear from you. We like to talk with everyone, those living with dementia, family members supporting them, and friends, along with business professionals, researchers, advocates, because we believe it takes all of us to work together on this. Alzheimer Speaks also helps companies expand their own brand footprint by leveraging our platforms, which we have many of. The radio show is just one. We have a YouTube channel that has a multitude of anything from training videos to little snippets to what we call dementia chats, where I interview people with dementia, and they talk about different topics and how they would like to see the world interact and engage with those that have dementia. And so we also have a blog and a website, so feel free to go to Alzheimer Speaks and check all of those out and help yourself to free tools and services that we provide. And if you're a business wanting to kind of tap into this market, please connect with me. You can just go to the contact button or email me at Lori, Lori, at alzheimerspeaks.com, and I would love to talk to you. I also have to thank our community at Alzheimer Speaks because you guys are so loyal and so wonderful. You see your likes, your clicks, your shares. I know you don't think that they do a lot, but they are so powerful. You have gotten us recognized by Oprah, Maria Shriver, Dr. Oz, and actually tomorrow I'm going to get an award by AARP for being an inspiring leader and a disruptor for the world of dementia. And, you know, all of those accolades and awards I share with all of you because I don't believe any of us do any of this work alone. So thank you so much, and I hope you continue to share our information with your sphere of influence because you are powerful and you have people in need out there. Again, remember, if you'd like to join the conversation, you can easily do that by calling 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. Let me go ahead and introduce our first guest. Susan Massad is a retired primary care physician educator who is on the faculty of the Eastside Institute, known as ESI, out in New York. She has had a career with a long interest in exploring the experience of illness for all involved, patients, family, friends, and providers. And with colleagues from ESI, she developed and co-leads workshops called The Joy of Dementia. You've got to be kidding. So I just want to welcome you to the show, Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for the nice introduction and for having us on the show. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to have you both with us. Let me go ahead and pull Mary in next. Mary Fridley is on the faculty of the Eastside Institute, where she has practiced therapy for 12 years and continues to use the social therapeutic approach as a teacher and workshop leader. Mary co-created and leads two popular workshop series, Laughing Matters and The Joy of Dementia. Both are for seniors and others across, and she does this across the country. She's also a playwright and a theater director and works as a fundraising consultant with New York City nonprofit. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your newest award. It is always wonderful to meet fellow disruptors.
Yep, it is fun, that's for sure.
Yes, it is fun. And very much necessary, given the world we're living in.
Exactly. There are so many of us out there too, which is just such a privilege always to be able to meet everyone. Now, before we get started, I always like to ask everybody one simple question. I'm going to throw this to Susan first, and that is: have you been personally touched in your sphere or family by dementia?
Yes, and I was thinking about how did I get into this field or become more interested, and a lot like everybody else I've met in the field, it's my own personal experience. My older sister is diagnosed with dementia and lives on a coast away from me, but I'm very, very involved in her care and how she, and kind of trying to mobilize resources to support her to continue to live a full life, and also from my professional interests. But many of my patients were friends, as it turned out, and as they got older, some people got dementia or became, diagnosed with dementia, or had family care, family members. So it's both. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Mary, how about you? Were you touched within your family or circle of friends?
I have been. My mom passed away, well, it's almost a year ago. We're about a week or so from it being a year since she died. And really, I guess you could say she died of complications from late-stage dementia. It came about fairly quickly, and it really was for the – and although, I suspect she was declining in ways that I probably didn't see or didn't want to see. But the last year was, it was just a fairly rapid decline. And as I said, that's, it's really why and how she ultimately passed away.
Okay. Great. Thank you. This first question I'm going to throw to you, Mary, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In your introduction and in your writings, you talk quite a bit about development, which is not a word that people generally use when they're talking about, relationships and dementia. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by development and how that can help people
Sure.
move forward, I guess?
Sure. Well, as some of the listeners may know, I won't go into incredible detail. There's obviously much that has been written about this. But most people are familiar with the work of Piaget and his understanding that human beings grow and develop in stages, and they're fairly stagnant stages. So. And I think the underlying, I don't even think it's underlying. I think the explicit message is that once you've reached, particularly adulthood, then there's not a lot more qualitative growth or development that's possible. so it's fairly linear. And and I think it serves to reinforce the notion that we all have, put in simple terms, that in some sense we become who we are. We become overly identified with certain roles, with certain identities, with certain responsibilities. But we have a sense of this is who I am. But that also is very quickly followed by this is what I can do and what I can't do. And I think particularly for adults, unlike very young children, the limitations of those roles are I think, incredibly constraining and, in our view, counterproductive to people being able to create and recreate their lives in the ways that would make them happy, more fulfilled, more successful, just more in ways that they want to see their lives going, but that can be very hard. It can be very frightening, all of that. So in some sense, I think for the Institute and for the work that we've been doing, not only here in the U.S. but internationally, is I think creating for us, put simply, development is the capacity that we all have as human beings to create and recreate our lives. That we can grow and develop, that we can do new kinds of things, we can create new possibilities in our lives over and over and over again, no matter how old we are and no matter our life circumstances. And that's very important because I think that one of the things that I find just so painful and so upsetting about the ways that people living with dementia are related to is as people who no longer have that capacity. They can't learn, they can't develop, they can't adjust to anything new, they have nothing to offer. Life is over. And I am deeply, deeply offended by that, which is, again, to kind of echo what Susan was saying, is no small part of why I feel so passionate about bringing this conversation into the dementia arena. At the same time, I think what we're concerned to do, and Susan can say more about this, and we'll obviously elaborate it on as we go along, but that we're also in our work and in creating these workshops, The Joy of Dementia that you spoke about, that what we want to be doing is creating environments in which everyone involved in what we call the dementia ensemble, to use theater language, is growing and developing. Because in my personal view, and this is based both on my personal experience with my mom, having been a therapist for many years, I lead groups, and I'm just a human being who is in the world and fairly sensitive to this. I think that we need to develop some new muscles, if you will, in order to be, as I think, giving as we need to be to people living with dementia. So I think we're very constrained about what we're able to do because I think, honestly, dementia upends everything. I think the experience that I had and people have is all of a sudden your world is turned upside down. That not only this person is no longer, if you will, making sense in the same way, but I think the real experience, and I think a source of the frustration and pain, is that we don't have what we need to be able to enter in that world as fully and as positively as we can. So I think we need to grow. We need to develop. We need to develop some new tools, and as I said, kind of exercise our emotional and social muscles in ways that we, by and large, don't have to do as adults.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you, and I think a lot of what we need is just to change our perceptions and our beliefs, because we have been told for years and years and years these people can't do anything. Everyone thinks they're in end stages and can't communicate, and there's so many gifts that they can give us in this process. Susan, do you have anything that you'd like to add in terms of using that word development in working with people with dementia?
Yes, I think that what Mary touched on, the ensemble, but I just from a practitioner for many years of health and healing, I guess I would call it. You're number one. I didn't know the word development until 40 years later, and after I was 40 years into the practice, and said, "Oh, I'm learning something about what I would been trying to do for a very long time, which is to support my patients, no matter what their problems were, but chronic illness, particularly where you get put into a role of, cancer victim, cancer survivor, diabetic, and how do you kind of create something other than that? How do you, which I would now call develop, how do you develop, given that you have a serious illness? That became something I became very interested in. And you come right up against the medical model, which is one of the more pernicious elements, which of our understanding of what dementia is, Alzheimer's is, which is to say it's this, we know it, it's a disease, and we know all about it because we can study it, we can abstract it, we can study it. But that model really takes it out of the uniqueness of the individual and the human being who's experiencing memory loss, and it basically disempowers the patient because it doesn't include everything they know about their illness, what they've learned, their own resources. So that's kind of where I was starting within this. And then when I began to become more involved with people with Alzheimer's and dementia and became more involved in the whole field in the reading, it became even more, that model has very, very little relevance or is very unhelpful, I think, when you apply it to a condition that is so idiosyncratic, that is so ever-changing and emergent and nonlinear and multifactorial as dementia, but also the individual bias of the medical model, which sees it as the person who has its condition. And that's where I think we began to work at the dementia ensemble, because the caregivers, the family members, the professionals, the person who has memory loss all have a dementia experience, and the dementia experience for the person that is involved in that ensemble, whether they have the diagnosis or not, can be as profound and life-changing as the experience of the person who's diagnosed. And I think that's what, when we're talking about some new tools, is how do we work with the ensemble? How do we build with that particular unit, and where in a way that everybody can develop and grow? And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the medical model and the individuality of this disease, and yet I look at dementia and I don't see it as a disease of one. I see it as a disease of society, one that we need some major cultural awareness and changes being made to. Dr. Stephen Post, I love one of the things that he talks about, and he talks about us. And no one being disabled, we're all just differently abled. And appreciating the fact that none of us started out of the factory just the same anyway. So why are we trying to mold everybody into this one perfect little model where we've never been that? Never. And really appreciating what skills people have at different points of their life, which are constantly changing. And so to me, it really is about adapting to another stage in life and understanding that you, no matter who you are more than a diagnosis. You are always a human being and a person first, and your disease should take second stage to your life. It needs to be supported and incorporated in it, but nobody wants to be called a disease or looked at as that's all they are. And it amazes me how much that happens in our world, because it's easy to categorize people. One of the things, Susan, I wanted to ask you was if you can say a little bit more about play and improvisation, and how can that help people dealing with dementia on both sides, those diagnosed and those caring for them?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's enormously in the dementia arena. Play and perform and the arts are just particularly effective in supporting and methodologically as a tool, if you want to call it, for people to use to develop and grow. So in going out into the world and meeting others who we found that we're not the only ones who are interested in the art, working with the arts and play and performance, that there's a number of people that are doing that, which was just very gratifying. And have both from our own work at the Eastside Institute around development and kind of exploring the role of play and performance to be able to, as an approach to helping people both be who they are, we say, and be who they're becoming, to be able to do things that they don't know how to do. And that's the kind of our understanding that we've developed at the Eastside Institute, that performance is just a very, very, and improv being a form of performance, just a very, very powerful way to support people to, as we say, go beyond themselves. It's a tool we have, and how to use that in the dementia arena. And, some of the people that we've met, like Karen Stolby, many people, I think, know her work now. She was an actress. She and her husband are both in performers, and her mother, I think, developed dementia, and she began to kind of just play with her and just kind of discovered that what that looked like, though, and what tools she was using when she was doing it were what the tools of good improvisation, which is to be supportive, to be accepting, to support the other in the conversation, to not negate, and to many of that kind of rules, as it were, or principles of improv were very, very useful for being in the moment, to be able to create a relation. I don't want to just put conversation, but to begin to develop a different kind of relationship based on what her mother's now changing condition, how it affected her language and her short-term memory and some of the other things that we know that are part of the dementia experience. So, and there's other people that I think are just doing very creative work and writing around this. Like many people know Ann Davis Bassing's work, where she, she's used theater, the arts, and writes about it very, very eloquently about the just importance of the relationality that's being built as people engage in these projects that doesn't depend on memory. And I love her. She wrote a book called Forget Memory, which I think sort of deconstructs how overly reliant we are on cognition and under-reliant on feeling and emotive activity, subjective activity.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I love how you had mentioned about play and arts are really a tool, and the development and the ability to grow and have fun and engage. And art has always been said to be in the eyes of the beholder. And so again, it gets back to our perceptions of what is beautiful, what is creative, and if we can switch that to there is no wrong, there is just a right way, when you're in the land of dementia, it's very freeing, and it's contagious in your outer world, outside of dementia too. It makes life much easier. So when you're not as judging and you're open to more things, and being in the moment, and there's just so many cool things that are happening with that. I'm going to pull in Mary and see if she wants to add anything to our conversation about play and improv.
Yeah, I was. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was just. I actually wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier about. And very kindly agreeing with what we were saying, but saying, you think that it's a a matter of, and it's important to be able to change your perspective on how you're seeing dementia, who human beings are. And I think for us, we would completely 100% agree, obviously. And I think for us, the important question is, and a question that I think is not asked often enough, in part because I think it's a question that we need to be asking 24 hours a day in some ways, but how are we going to do that? How are we as individuals, how are we as a community, how is we a world going to be able to see in new ways? Because it's just simply not easy. Nor do I think it's just a matter of individualistic willpower. I think we have to, one, do it together, but two, I think we have to really grapple with what do we have to do to be able to do something new, have a new conversation, touch someone in a different way. And for us, and this is where, kind of coming back to what Susan was saying, for us, this is where play and performance and improvisation are so important, because I think with play and performance, it allows you to, it allows you to move about and around, if you will, the problem in very new and creative ways. And I say problem with a small p. And it allows you to not be so paralyzed by thinking that, your options are limited, and that you don't, that it's impossible to do something that you have no idea how it is you're going to do. And I think to Susan's point, I think it is so important in the dementia experience and in life for us to be able to have the support and the kind of environments that allow us to take the risk of doing something and run the risk of looking completely ridiculous. So I had written a piece that was just published in Changing Aging, in which I was talking some about the weirdness of dementia off of a conversation or workshop that Susan and I had led in California, where one of the women who had just been diagnosed with dementia said very poignantly, kind of, what can I say? This is just weird. And I'm advocating, and I think in our work, Susan and I are advocating, if you will, for people to learn how to be much weirder and then to have the support for dealing with all that comes with that. Because, again, it's not easy to do. But I think one of the things that I was proposing and feel very strongly about is, I think the key is in all of this is not so much to be weird, but to perform as weird, to really make a self-conscious effort to be someone you're not, to be able to be with a person whose cognitive skills have diminished, who may or may not be able to speak or do language in the ways that we're familiar with. So you might have to babble. You might have to draw upon your capacity to entertain and be a part of fantasy. All kinds of things go on. And that's hard. And again, I think it underlies a lot of the frustration and anger the family members, caregivers, et cetera, often feel.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying in terms of being weird. I think we have to learn to embrace being different, because we have been molded to be the same or be a certain way through commercials, through our own cultures, through our own family beliefs, all of that we are supposed to be a certain way. And I think if we can start to, and I think we're starting to see this shift now in our culture all around the world, where people are starting to stand stronger, in their own shoes, going, this is me, this is the way I like it, this is the way I am. And with dementia, somebody might not like everything about the disease, needless to say, but they sure as heck shouldn't be ashamed of having a disease. And so, one of the things that you and Susan talked about in terms of, how do we reach people? This isn't an easy thing to change. For me, what I have found is I use something when I speak and train, which I call emotional-based training. And I think it's about, we need people to feel that they can make a difference. And I think we've lost our knowledge of knowing that we have a power of one and that we can have an impact not only on ourselves but on everyone around us if we know them or not, just by our nonverbals. We don't even have to get into a conversation, but becoming more aware of how we react and how we think. And then I think we also have to provide more safe places like your trainings and memory cafes and support groups, and just even being out in the community where people feel safe to be who they are, to be able to make a mistake in terms of societal, righteousness one way or another, because knowing that none of us are perfect. And then another thing that I think helped me and many others that I work with was shifting what was important. And that was getting out of this right or wrong kind of corrective model of care and switching to more of a compassionate care, which was really about, are they safe? Are they happy? Are they pain-free? Because if they're comfortable, I can be comfortable. If they're anxious, I'm going to be anxious. And, a lot of times when we're embarrassed or uncomfortable with a situation, they're going to model that back to us, which I'm sure you see all the time in what you're doing. But if we're playful and in a good mood, they're going to be there too. And again, we play off one another's moods and nonverbals, which I think is absolutely huge. And I love, I tell people one of the biggest gifts my mom gave me was her dementia and being on the journey with her, because she actually taught me to play again. Because as an adult, we get so serious. We take ourselves overly serious. We think the world's going to stop, if I don't answer my phone, if I don't check this email. And I had to be present with her. I had to put that down. And that was one of the biggest gifts she gave me, was to just say, spend time with me. You don't even necessarily have to talk. Just sit by me. Just be in my presence. And how rich that is. But I think our world has gotten so fast-paced that we've forgotten about the importance of our true relationships. Susan, I'm going to throw this one to you, and then I'll throw it back to Mary. You guys lead a conversation called The Joy of Dementia. Can you say a little bit more about that and why the focus on joy, when so many don't believe that's even possible?
Well, I think just in terms of what do you mean by joy, which is, I think a lot of people have a preconceived notion of, well, it's a thing, it's the thing we discover, the joy inside of something. And, there's a lot of things about dementia that is not pleasant, something you wouldn't want, from your short-term memory loss to the loss of your independence in the traditional forms like a driver's license or the right to live alone or your home that you had. And, to us, I think what is joyful is discovering the relational, that it's the creative building together with the other. And in this case, the others, because I think I don't want to lose sight of the whole dementia ensemble, and continuously looking at how can we do this task of building our relationships together, given that we've had some, profound changes in terms of languaging, of short-term memory, of mobility sometimes, so that be able to sort of improvise to me or to create something new with all of that. I find a very joyful experience, because it's creatively building our relationships together. And, so one of the things we do in the workshops is give people an experience of improv with some games and exercises. And we show, some video clips that we think really show people's as you say, what you learned with your mother, that kind of experience where people are actually creating a different relationship. They're figuring out how to do this together. I think it's where we focus our gaze in some ways on the relationship. And there's many of these things that we still have to be attentive to that I wouldn't want to deny with this, which is, a big one is safety, the safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
And people will raise that. Well, what about safety? You have to be more firm about that, or coercive, or put your foot down. And I think that we can discover how to be safe together. That it's not a something you can impose. What is safety? What's the limits? Where can you go with this? So it's something that you build together, and I think that could be very joyful. Yeah. And you build with a lot of pain and loss and despair, and we call it building with crap. It's the hard stuff. Yeah. It's not, as I say, just sort of extracting some concept of joy and putting it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely is the grieving process. And I think a lot of what we've always focused on with dementia is the loss. But with loss, there are gains too. There's the loss of our filters. There's the loss of judging others that eventually comes, those are both really freeing things, that can be really nice. The loss of pressure once you don't have the element of time anymore, in your life. But we don't focus on those things as how could they be positive.
Well, it seems to me that there's a lot of assumptions in the field when people are working with people who have the diagnosis that they must feel terrible. They've lost their short-term memory, but that's not necessarily true. But, it's also just even exploring the concept of loss, or what that means to people, or that the experience of no longer being the person, quotes, that you were, as it were. So I think that the process of discovering each other, a different kind of relationality, involves just being open to the other in a way that is, I think can be very joyful, and kind of not to make assumptions that the other is feeling exactly like you do. Yep.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that there's a lot of that happens, and being open to some of the detours. I know some of the detours that I hated that happened in my life were probably some of the best things that ever happened to me, because they took me down a different path I didn't even know existed, and opened my eyes. And so there can be some real beauty there. I think we've got a caller, so let me just double check here. We've got somebody from a 740 number. Or 704 number. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Lori, this is Julie Bigham from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, hi.
I have the Joy-Filled Visits kit that you and I have talked about earlier in the year, and I'm just so excited to hear this conversation, and just the tools that we can all provide to family caregivers and professional caregivers that can bring joy into these moments. I just think it's wonderful.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you for calling in. And you've got a great kit. Do you want to just go ahead and give out your website, and people can check into your kit and how that might be able to bring people joy?
Sure. It's Joy-Filled Visits, www.joyfilledvisits.com. I just think the more joy we can teach people is just really so beneficial, not only to the person who's living with dementia, but also the families who are just struggling to know, how do I have a visit? How do I bring joy into this process? So I'm just glad to hear other folks that are doing the same thing. It's awesome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Julie. Appreciate it. And she's in the process of writing a new book, too, which will be out. So we'll let you know when that comes out. But thank you for calling in and adding to the show. Mary, I'm going to go ahead and pull you in. And What are is there anything more that you would like to say regarding the joy of dementia that maybe Susan and I didn't cover?
Well, one of the joys I was thinking about is it is just so joyous to meet other people who love joy. I mean, because part of this is that, of course, as always, people often who are doing different kinds of things, working outside the box, whatever, often feel like we're doing it alone. So it's both wonderful that there's, I think, a much broader community of people out there who may be doing it on their own, maybe doing it as part of organizations, but are really trying to come up with infinitely more human ways to live both in the world and within the dementia experience. But the other thing, I was thinking about something you were saying, which I really just want to echo what you said about we, and particularly we as adults, take ourselves way too seriously. And part of that is because we're not supported to play. We forget how to play. We have attitudes toward playing, whatever that is, but we're not allowed to play in ways that I think are potentially transformative. So for me, the joy of these workshops, in addition to what Susan was saying, is that we really are, and it's mostly adults, but we really are helping people to rediscover that they are, in fact, creative people. And I was struck by, I was reading your website prior to the interview, and I was very touched by, one, just how wonderfully humane and humanistic you are, in both with your mom and in just generally in addressing, all that's going on within dementia. But also you were talking about, or somebody was saying about you, I don't quite remember, that you're very concerned with giving voice to those whose voices have been silent, which very much resonates for me. And obviously that's one of the things I've been doing for many years as an activist, as an organizer, as a therapist, as a human being, is to help people express themselves in ways that I think they find difficult. But I think one of the things that has been silenced, which is I feel very deeply about, is our creativity. That I think we live in a culture where, sadly, the only people who really get to perform and play and take on new roles and new performances are people who are socially sanctioned to do so, i.e. the actors on stage or the musicians on stage. And I think what Susan and I are doing is creating, if you will, stages, which for people to kind of reconnect with, rediscover together that, no, actually human beings are enormously creative. We create everything. That our humanity is not, in our view, tied to our ability to know, or to think, or to reason, or to understand, but in our capacity to create. So really to have people be able to create together, create something new together, and in a way I don't even think we care so much about what they create, but that they're discovering that they can create and that they could do something new at any moment in their lives. And just kind of in closing, I'm thinking about just how important that is, because we live in an increasingly, I was just watching the news again this morning and thinking, man, we live in a crazy world. It's a world that I think more and more of us are finding frightening. It's unstable. It's chaotic. I think people feel profoundly insecure, and mostly we don't know what the heck to do about it all. But I think that the pull when you're in, and I think people in some sense in the dementia experience feel that. It upends everything we thought we knew. But I think the pull, if without support and kind of left to our own devices, if you will, I think the pull is to try to control and contain things. And I think we are very strongly saying we understand that, and we want to support you to have, if you will, creativity be your go-to, your go-to position. That in fact it's a moment of I think that can create great fear and anxiety, but it's also a moment that, much like dementia, really is giving us a lot of license to do things we never knew were possible and to be enormous creative, and that's what's happening around the world. And that's what I find so touching about your work, because I think you're saying, no, we're not going to be confined by the ways we know how to do this or the things that we were taught about what aging means or what memory loss means or whatever it is to be human. And that to me is truly, truly joyous.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I switched careers, which was almost 10 years ago, I said I refused to work in a broken system. And so I had to be an entrepreneur. I had to work by myself because I couldn't follow the rules because I knew they weren't effective
right.
to so many. And when you talk about, silencing, our creative abilities or our belief that we even have something to give, to me, it's about not being part of that cookie cutter process, believing that we have something to contribute, that we can improve it. And to me, I've tossed the word out, perfection, because I see so many people get stuck in the mud trying to be perfect instead of just making a little bit of progress every day.
I agree.
Knowing that in the next moment you have a little bit more that you can do, and you can do it different. If you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up. Use it as a learning tool. But we've been taught so many things, in my mind, so wrong, that has gotten us stuck in the mud. And even when it comes to joy, believing that you can have a life filled with joy, even if you don't have a lot of money and you maybe are unemployed or maybe you're diagnosed with dementia, there's still joy in the world, but you're only going to find it if you're looking for it. And so, I talk about the fears, the tears, and the joy. And, the fear is usually what's coming in our future. The tears are everything we feel we lost. And the joy is in the moment we have in front of us. And if we aren't present, and not that we don't have to plan ahead and not that we don't have to grieve loss, but if we can learn to consciously care and know where we're spending our time, we can be more present in the moment, because the moment is the only place we can identify joy or create it. That's the only opportunity. And when you consciously understand that, choices become simpler in terms of what do you want out of life and what are you going to look for, in life. And that's what I love about your program. I'm going to throw this back to Susan. And just, Susan, if you can tell us a little bit about how people can learn more about your program, The Joy of Dementia, and more information about the Eastside Institute, that would be wonderful.
Well, we have the website, which has all our programs, including the Joy of Dementia. But people can also contact Mary and I, and I can give you our emails, because we are interested in, and I want to really thank you for asking the question. We really are interested in bringing the Joy of Dementia workshops out to new audiences, new places. We just got a small grant to do 5 workshops next year in poor communities in New York City, because these are communities that often don't get the creative, cutting-edge approaches. They generally are kind of passed over when it comes to that kind of thing. So we're very thrilled about that. But we'd love to take it to travel, to go places and bring it to new audiences, because I think it's a very unique experience for people, just from the vantage point as we bring together people who don't normally sit in a room and have a conversation, which is care partners and professionals and people with dementia and people who are concerned that they might have some kind of memory loss, to family members, and to create the conversation with that mix. So our website is www.eastsideinstitute.org, and my email is Susan, SUSAN, MASSAD38 @gmail.com. And Mary, give yours.
Oh, let me get Mary live on the. Okay, Mary.
Yes. My email is M as in Mary, Fridley, Frid as in David, Ley, at eastsideinstitute.org. And if I could, just to build on what Susan was saying, I think that, what we've been doing at the Institute over the last 40 years now is, going out around the world and around the country and around New York City and wherever there are people to really find innovators who have, radical ideas, practices, and, bringing them into conversation with each other and, with us, and to really give people what they need to develop as innovators in their fields and their communities, because that's often something people feel very alone doing. And just to highlight a couple of things that I think are pretty special. One is we in fact, we've just finished it. We co-host a international conference called Performing the World. It's every 2 years. It just took place in New York last month. And it, brings together 400, 500 activists, advocates, academics, ordinary people who in some form or fashion have discovered the power of creativity, of play, of performance, and are using it in their work. And it's very diverse work and in many, many communities. I think we had people from about 30 countries. And some of those are also participating in what we call the international class, which is our flagship program, which, brings, it gives people an opportunity to study this approach, this performance approach that Susan and I have been talking about, to grow, to develop as innovators, as leaders, as people who, recognize that performance and play have an important role to play if we're going to change our world for the good. So we definitely invite people to study with us, and just to reiterate what Susan was saying, we would love to come out and and visit and work with as many organizations, colleagues around the country and around the world as possible.
Wonderful. I know one other area I think that's in great need is rural areas.
Yes.
If you have an opportunity, because a lot of times they just don't have the funds, but for grant writing, that might be another target for you on that. I wanted to ask, how long is your program? Is it a couple hours? Is it day long? Mary, if you want to go ahead and answer that.
It varies. I mean, I think we've done them anywhere from. It depends in part on the setting and the people involved, but it could be anywhere from an hour and a half to 4 hours. And obviously, a lot we design the trainings, the workshops with the people with whom we're doing them. So again, that we could do longer or shorter things, but that's generally speaking how long they are.
Okay, great. And then, Susan, do you guys have a newsletter that people can sign up for to be able to hear about, like, your conference and your programs, where they're going to be? And
we have a very active website. We don't have. I don't think we have a newsletter. We have an online, just kind of it's not exactly a newsletter. It's a community news, it's called, but it just reports on there was a conference,
Okay.
a single thing. So it's mostly the website where people can go and kind of read about what's coming up. Performing the World has its own website, it's wonderful to read about, because then you can just get a flavor of the kind of workshops and presentations, of which we had, I think we had about 3 or 4 on people kind of focused on new performances of dementia and memory loss.
Just again to add what Susan's saying, if you go to our website, eastsideinstitute.org, you can sign up, and then you receive regular updates, information, e-blasts. So that's, as Susan was saying, that's really the best way to know how, what it is we're doing and when.
Okay.
Or to contact us, and we'll be happy to keep you posted about particularly our dementia-related activities.
Okay. And so, again, the website is eastsideinstitute.org. That's eastsideinstitute.org. And I've got Mary's email on the radio show, but I'll add Susan's on there. So we will get that updated. I did not have that earlier, but I really appreciate the work that the two of you are doing and spending this hour with us. Susan, any last comments that you have?
I just want to thank you again for having us on, and as Mary congratulated you for your Disruptor Award. I think it's great that the AARP needs more disruptors. And, just invite people to write us to stay in touch, because I guess I would say I'm a dementia activist, a movement builder, and one of the things that gives me enormous joy is finding people who are in the same path as you are, and just who are challenging the traditional narrative of loss. So I'd love to hear from people.
Great. And Mary, any last comments from you?
Well, I echo what Susan just said, and I want to support everybody who's listening, who might be listening later, to play. Yep.
And believe in the possibility of joy. Believe
exactly.
that it is there. It might look really different than what it used to, but it's still there. And sometimes just paying a little closer attention to people's nonverbals, the glint in the eyes, the body language, noises that people are making, all of that stuff adds up. And the power of music and the power of connection that we have at all levels. No matter what's happening to our bodies, we still have abilities to connect in different forms than just our regular speech. And what I found with my mom was, as she declined and as I got deeper into reading nonverbals or being more comfortable in the moment, those are the things that resonate with me now that she's gone. Those real simple little engagements bring me true joy. And, it's not the big fluff that I thought it used to be. With that. So this has been a great conversation. Again, you can get more information by going to the eastsideinstitute.org. And in wrapping up, I'm just going to give a shout out. I'm excited. I'm heading out to Seattle, and I'm also going to be in California next week. So if you are in either of those areas, you can look on my website to find, we're doing a screening of the film His Neighbor Phil, Monday, October 15th at the Strom Jewish Community Center in Mercer Island in Washington. And then we will be on the 16th, we're going to be in Seattle and Newcastle and Shoreline, all in Washington, again with Aegis Senior Living. And then I'll be going out to California. We'll be by Oceanside and Laguna, again with Aegis. So please check us out. I'd love to meet you while I'm on the road. And then I would be amiss if I didn't give a shout out to the Memory Cafe Directory.com. There you can register your Memory Cafe, or you can find one. It is free calendar cards. The Memory System is the one who created it, and it is by far the best directory out there right now. We have over 500 Memory Cafes in the U.S., which is just spectacular. And if you're interested in dining opportunities, check out purpletables.com. They have a new app and training system to help restaurants get on board with becoming dementia friendly, and they have more requests than they have restaurants at this point, but that will all change. And then last, I'm just going to give a big shout out to the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. They do a lot with meditation, very holistic. So if you're looking for diet, exercise, meditation techniques, they are the go-to place. And you can go to alzheimersprevention.org. You guys have a great week, and make sure you pass this on. People will love the information that you're willing to give them. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Meredith from the Senior Fitness with Meredith podcast, where I discuss all things for seniors, from fitness, your health and wellness journeys, how to be all over strong and beyond. I also have my mini podcast called Motivation with Meredith. It's a great, quick motivational pick-me-up for your days. Join me, listen now, search for Senior Fitness with Meredith on your favorite podcast platform.